I never expected to find my boss, the same woman who made my life hell for 3 years, sobbing on my doorstep at 2 a.m., mascara streaking down her face, begging for help. What happened next changed both our lives forever. If you've ever wondered if people can truly change, or if one act of kindness can erase years of tension, stay with me until the end of this incredible story. Like and subscribe if you believe in second chances. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one unfolds. The rain pounded against the windows of Mark Wilson's small apartment as he jolted awake to the sound of his phone buzzing. He squinted at the screen, 1:47 a.m. and an unknown number. As a single father with a 6-year-old daughter sleeping in the next room, late-night calls sent his heart racing with worry. He answered with a groggy, "Hello? Mark? Is that you?" The voice was slurred but unmistakable. Vanessa Reeves, his boss of 3 years and the woman who seemed to take personal pleasure in making his work life as difficult as possible. "Ms. Reeves? What's going on?" Mark sat up, instantly alert despite the late hour. I think I'm in trouble. I don't know where I am exactly. Some bar downtown. My phone's about to die. I can't drive. I can't call an Uber. Her voice broke. I don't have anyone else to call. Mark rubbed his eyes, torn between the satisfaction of hanging up and the nagging sense of responsibility he couldn't shake. He glanced at the framed photo of his daughter Emma on the nightstand. What would she think of her father if he abandoned someone in need, even someone like Vanessa? "Text me the address before your phone dies. I'll be there as soon as I can." 20 minutes later, Mark pulled up outside a seedy bar in a part of town he rarely visited. He spotted Vanessa immediately, huddled under the awning, her designer outfit soaked through, her normally perfect hair plastered to her face. She looked nothing like the intimidating executive who criticized his reports and denied his requests for flexible hours to care for Emma. "Get in," he said, unlocking the passenger door. "What happened?" Vanessa slumped into the seat, reeking of alcohol. "Company dinner. Clients left. Kept drinking. Some guys started getting aggressive. Bartender kicked them out but said I should leave too." She turned to him, her eyes red and unfocused. "Why are you here? You hate me." Mark didn't answer as he pulled away from the curb. He didn't have a good answer himself. "Where do you live?" "Oakwood Towers. Penthouse." Of course she lived in the most expensive building in the city. Mark sighed and headed in that direction. "Emma okay?" Vanessa asked unexpectedly. Mark glanced at her in surprise. He'd mentioned his daughter's name maybe twice at work, and never to Vanessa directly. "She's asleep at home with Mrs. Patel from next door watching her. She's the reason you're always asking for time off." It wasn't a question. "She's the reason for everything I do," Mark replied simply. They drove in silence for several minutes before Vanessa spoke again, her voice smaller than he'd ever heard it. "I threw up in the bathroom of that bar. Some college girls helped me. They were so nice." "Why were they so nice to me?" "Nobody's nice to me." Mark gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Maybe because they saw someone who needed help. Like you did?" She turned to look at him, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Why did you come get me, Mark? I've been horrible to you." Before he could answer, Vanessa suddenly grabbed the dashboard. "Pull over. I'm going to be sick again." Mark barely managed to stop the car before Vanessa flung the door open and retched onto the wet pavement. Without thinking, he reached into the glove compartment for the pack of tissues he kept for Emma and handed them to Vanessa when she finished. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, wiping her mouth. "This is humiliating." "It's okay. We're almost to your place." When they arrived at Oakwood Towers, Mark had to help Vanessa out of the car. The doorman gave them a disapproving look as Mark half-carried her to the elevator. "Penthouse," he told the doorman, who reluctantly used his key card to grant them access. The elevator ride was silent. When they reached her floor, Vanessa fumbled with her purse, unable to find her keys. "Here," Mark said, gently taking her purse and locating them himself. He opened her door and helped her inside. Vanessa's penthouse was immaculate and impersonal, like a showroom rather than a home. No photos, no personal touches. Just expensive furniture and abstract art. It struck Mark as profoundly sad. "Let me get you some water," he said, guiding her to the couch before heading to the kitchen. When he returned with a glass of water and some aspirin he'd found in a drawer, Vanessa was crying silently. "Hey, it's okay," he said awkwardly, sitting beside her. "Drink this. You'll feel better in the morning." "No, I won't," she whispered. "I'll feel exactly the same as I always do. Alone." Mark didn't know what to say to that. This vulnerable, broken woman was nothing like the cold, demanding boss he knew. "Why are you alone tonight?" he asked finally. "I thought you were with clients." Vanessa took a shaky breath. "They left hours ago. I stayed because I didn't want to come back here. To this empty place." She gestured around her. "Pathetic, right? The big, bad boss is afraid of her own apartment." Mark thought of his own small, cluttered home, toys scattered across the floor, Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator, the mismatched furniture they'd collected over the years. It wasn't much, but it was warm. It was home. "It's not pathetic to want company," he said quietly. Vanessa looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. "You're a good person, Mark Wilson. Too good for that crappy job I give you." She took the water and aspirin from him. "I should let you go home to your daughter." Mark stood up. "Will you be okay?" She nodded, then suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand. "Thank you. I won't forget this." Mark smiled sadly. "You probably will. But that's okay." As he drove home through the rain, Mark wondered if Vanessa would even remember any of this in the morning. He'd seen it before, people who behaved badly while drunk and then conveniently forgot everything the next day. He expected nothing different from Vanessa Reeves. When he arrived home, he thanked Mrs. Patel and checked on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed giraffe clutched tightly in her arms. Mark kissed her forehead gently. "Your daddy did a good thing tonight, Em," he whispered. "Even if no one else ever knows it." The next morning was chaos as usual. Emma spilled her cereal, couldn't find her favorite socks, and insisted on bringing 3 different stuffed animals to school. By the time Mark dropped her off at school and arrived at work, he was already exhausted. He was 10 minutes late, and he braced himself for Vanessa's usual cutting remark about punctuality. But when he reached his desk, there was no sign of her. Probably nursing a massive hangover, he thought. At noon, just as Mark was about to head to the break room for lunch, Vanessa's office door opened. She emerged looking perfectly put together as always, crisp suit, immaculate makeup, not a hair out of place. No one would ever guess that less than 12 hours ago, she'd been a mess in his passenger seat. Mark kept his head down, expecting her to walk past without acknowledgement. Instead, she stopped directly in front of his desk. "Mark," she said, her voice steady and professional. "Could I see you in my office, please?" Here it comes, he thought. She's going to fire me for seeing her at her worst. Or maybe she really doesn't remember and I'm in trouble for being late. He followed her into her office, closing the door behind him as she requested. Vanessa didn't sit behind her desk as she usually did. Instead, she leaned against it, arms crossed. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. Mark blinked in surprise. "Excuse me? Last night. You came to my rescue when you had every reason to ignore my call. I was not in a good state. You remember?" Mark couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. A faint smile crossed her face. Every mortifying detail. The vomiting. The crying. The self-pity. She shook her head. Not my finest moment. It's okay, Mark said automatically. Anyone would have. No, Vanessa interrupted. Anyone would not have done what you did. Especially not someone I've treated the way I've treated you. She took a deep breath. Which brings me to the second reason I called you in here. I've been reviewing your personnel file. Mark's stomach dropped. Here it was, she was going to fire him after all. You've requested flexible working hours 7 times in the past year. I've denied every request. She met his eyes directly. I'd like to rectify that mistake. Effective immediately, you can adjust your hours to accommodate your daughter's schedule, as long as you complete your 40 hours weekly. Mark stared at her, speechless. Additionally, Vanessa continued, there's a senior analyst position opening next month. The salary is nearly double what you're making now. I've recommended you for the role. I don't understand, Mark finally managed. Vanessa's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Last night, you saw me at my absolute worst and you showed me kindness I didn't deserve. It made me realize I've been judging you unfairly. You're not just a good employee, Mark. You're a good person. She paused. Something I haven't been for a very long time. Mark didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Vanessa Reeves he knew. You said something last night that stuck with me, she continued. When I asked why you came to help me, you said, maybe because they saw someone who needed help. That's it, isn't it? So simple. Someone needed help, so you helped. She shook her head. I can't remember the last time I did something like that. Ms. Reeves. Vanessa, please. Vanessa, Mark corrected himself. I appreciate this, but you don't owe me anything. I disagree, she said firmly. But this isn't about owing. It's about recognizing that I've been wrong. About you. About a lot of things. She straightened up. That's all I wanted to say. You can go back to work now. Mark turned to leave, still stunned by the conversation. Oh, and Mark? Vanessa called after him. How old is your daughter? 6, he replied. Her name is Emma. Vanessa nodded. Emma, she repeated softly. Thank you for telling me. The next few weeks brought changes Mark could never have anticipated. Vanessa's attitude toward him, toward everyone in the office, really, shifted dramatically. She was still demanding and exacting in her standards, but the cutting remarks and unnecessary criticism disappeared. She began acknowledging good work with actual praise. People noticed. Mark's flexible schedule made a world of difference. He could drop Emma off at school every morning and pick her up most afternoons. He was there for her soccer practices and parent-teacher conferences. The constant guilt he'd felt at missing important moments in her life began to ease. One Friday afternoon, as Mark was packing up to leave early for Emma's school play, Vanessa stopped by his desk. Emma's performance is today, right? She asked. Mark nodded, surprised she'd remembered. She's playing a tree. She has one line, but she's been practicing it for weeks. Vanessa smiled. I'm sure she'll be the best tree that school has ever seen. She hesitated, then added, I have something for her. A small gift. Is that okay? She handed him a beautifully wrapped package. Mark took it, touched by the gesture. That's very kind of you. Thank you. It's nothing special. Just something I thought she might like. Vanessa seemed almost nervous. Have a good weekend, Mark. That evening, after Emma's triumphant performance as tree number 3, Mark gave her Vanessa's gift. Inside was a beautiful illustrated book of fairy tales and a small stuffed giraffe, remarkably similar to Emma's beloved but worn one. Who's it from, Daddy?" Emma asked, already clutching the giraffe. "From my boss," Mark replied. "Her name is Vanessa." "Is she nice?" Mark thought about it for a moment. "She is now," he said honestly. The following Monday, Mark brought in a thank you note Emma had drawn for Vanessa, featuring a stick figure with long hair surrounded by hearts and glitter. Vanessa accepted it with a gravity that suggested she was being handed a priceless artifact. "She's very talented," Vanessa said, carefully placing the drawing on her desk. "You must be very proud." "I am," Mark agreed. "She's everything to me." Something flickered across Vanessa's face, a shadow of emotion Mark couldn't quite identify. "You're lucky," she said softly. "To have someone who matters that much." 2 months later, Mark was officially promoted to senior analyst. The salary increase meant he could finally move Emma out of their tiny apartment into a proper house with a yard. When he shared the news with Vanessa, she seemed genuinely pleased for him. "You've earned it," she told him. "Your work has always been exceptional. I should have recognized that sooner." As they settled into their new professional relationship, Mark began to see glimpses of the person behind Vanessa's carefully constructed facade. She worked longer hours than anyone. She had no photos on her desk. No one ever called her except for work. The penthouse he'd seen that night, beautiful but empty, seemed to be a perfect metaphor for her life. One evening, as they were both working late on a major project, Vanessa ordered dinner for them. As they ate takeout at the conference table, surrounded by spreadsheets and reports, Mark found himself asking the question that had been on his mind for months. "Why did you call me that night? Out of everyone you could have called?" Vanessa set down her fork, considering the question. "Because I knew you'd come," she said finally. "Even though you had every reason to hate me, I knew you wouldn't leave me stranded." "I don't hate you," Mark said. "I never did." "You should have." She smiled ruefully. "I was awful to you." "Why?" Mark asked. "Was it something I did?" Vanessa shook her head. "It was something you had." She looked away. "A life outside of work. A purpose beyond this office. A child who loves you." She gestured around them. "This is all I have. And seeing someone who had what I'd given up, it made me resentful." "What happened?" Mark asked gently. "If you don't mind me asking." Vanessa was quiet for so long that Mark thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, as if she were talking about someone else. "I was engaged once. 10 years ago. We talked about having children." She twisted the napkin in her hands. "Then this company offered me a position, a significant promotion. But it meant relocating, working 60-hour weeks, being available at all hours. And he didn't want to move?" Mark guessed. "He would have. He offered to." Vanessa's eyes were focused on something Mark couldn't see. "But I knew what would happen. He'd resent me for the hours I worked. For missing dinners and weekends. For putting my career first. So I ended it before we could destroy each other." "I'm sorry," Mark said, and he meant it. Vanessa shrugged, visibly pulling herself back together. "It was the right decision. I've accomplished everything I set out to do professionally." "At what cost?" The words slipped out before Mark could stop them. Instead of being offended, Vanessa laughed, a short, hollow sound. "That's the question, isn't it? The one I started asking myself the morning after you drove me home." She looked at him directly. "What has all this success cost me? And was it worth it?" The conversation shifted something in their relationship. A wall came down. They weren't friends exactly, the power dynamic of boss and employee remained, but there was a new understanding between them. As Christmas approached, Mark invited Vanessa to Emma's school holiday concert.